Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media. Hello, good evening everybody. My name is Mel Ve and this is Conscious Consumer Network coming to you live. And tonight we have an episode of Dragonology, my absolute favorite. And we are heading well into season 3 as this is of course episode 7. And tonight we're going to be dealing with aspects of the dragon. So settle in, this is going to be a good one because there are many different aspects to the dragon because dragons come in many different shapes and forms and are hidden behind many layers of symbolic allegory. Dragons are often referenced under different names or labels, which is why people may not identify certain creatures as dragons. And in fact, dragons turn up absolutely everywhere, and I do challenge people, please do see if you can find a Chinese restaurant without a dragon in it. I myself have not yet managed. One of the important aspects when we are going through Dragonology to recognize are the themes. The themes are the key to deciphering the deception of the dragon. And it's always important to notice the reoccurring themes because many similar themes are constantly reoccurring in cultural mythologies. And it is in charting these particular patterns that we begin to see the full picture of the true history about humanity's origins and present state of reality. The truth will always present itself in one form or another, but it is up to us always to recognize the clues to the truth left for us in the themes. A very noticeable theme is that myths have a fantastical or dreamlike quality about them. And this is due to the many strange and somewhat distorted figures which emerge from them, such as what we might reference as monsters or hybrid beings. In mythology, animals have been recorded to walk and talk like men. Now, I reference the word theme here because it is a very important word. It has a very key dragon root word in it, being the T-H-E. The or the, which is commonly used in sentences. For example, we talk about the dog sat on the mat. We put or insert the word the in grammatically correct sentences when in fact this word doesn't really seem to have much of a purpose at all until you understand that all language and words were created by the dragons or the gods and given to humanity, and that's why they've cleverly inserted their symbolism in root words into various places, which is why some words seem to have no function superficially. But if you understand the deeper allegory of dragon root words, you begin to understand why these words have been put in there. And it's really to lock down the Ophidian vibration, or the dragon vibration, which is interwoven into the fabric of our reality through our language. So the word theme, again, as I said, the themes are the key. And even the word theme has a very key word in it, being the T-H-E, which turns up in some very interesting words. Of course, theoi, T-H-E-O-Y, is the Greek word which references the gods, the plural. T-H-E would be the singular, one god. T-H-E-O-I, theoi, is many gods, deities, dragons, or angels. Because if we're talking about gods or deities, we are always talking about dragons and angels. They're in the same thing, in the same category in the world of Dragonology. So some of the interesting places that the word T-H-E turns up, for example, is the word theology, the study of the Bible or religion, as most people know. We talk about the study of theology. A theologian studies theology, for example. Pantheon references the place where the gods live. There's a pantheon in Greece and in Paris, I believe, which is a replica of the one in Greece. Thelema being the religion or cult that was started by Aleister Crowley. Theosophy, of course, being the belief system or spiritual cult that was started by Madame Blavatsky. Monotheism, which is the belief in one God, and its counterpart then is polytheism. And then, of course, Athena, one of the most commonly known gods of Greek mythology, after which the city of Athens is named. And of course, a very interesting place where the THE root turns up is in the root of the word therianthropy, which is a very interesting word because it references the specific quality held by the dragons, which is the ability to shapeshift. Therianthropy is said to be the mythological ability of a human being, but I say not only human beings, I'm saying any being that shapeshifts has somewhat of a supernatural ability, a godlike or dragon-like ability. So I wouldn't say it's a human ability, although that's technically how it's referenced in Wikipedia. Therianthropy is said to be the mythological ability of human beings, but really I'd say it's supernatural beings, to metamorphose into other animals by means of shapeshifting. Now, we talk about the word anthropology, which is the study of human culture and behavior, which is where anthropy comes in. But that is, I suppose, is also misleading because generally true human beings don't necessarily have the ability to shapeshift. It's really more a draconian or supernatural ability that we don't seem to have. But the word really, it's interesting that it turns up in therianthropy, much like it's interesting to notice that the orf, O-R-P-H, which is also another key dragon root word, turns up in the word metamorphose, as if to say the ability of changing shape, shape-shifting is specifically a godlike or dragon-like trait, as it is, this stuff is encoded into the very words itself. You can see it there, the root words. Labels and language symbolically mask themes, and it's interesting to notice when we go through Dragonology, we decode a number of very interesting symbols and take you through how they are multi-layered in different respects. But words and language act as symbolic representatives of much deeper themes and allegories, and indeed they are very much a case of being interrelated through being etymologically cognizant with other words, through having homonyms or synonyms that indicate some thematic pattern. The language of symbolism is a very multi-layered thematic construct. And when you start to recognize the patterns, it becomes easier to sort of pull apart the layers and understand what's going on and how these layers of themes are built up. Dragons are thus referenced under many different labels and symbols, and the interrelation of which becomes apparent when we look at the themes and how they all interconnect with each other. Now, here are some previously identified variations of the dragon. Of course, there are many more. We've gone through so many over the course of the various dragonologies we've done. But I'm going to reference some of the more commonly dealt with ones so that we can just get a context from which we launched tonight's study into dragonology. These are some of the dragon labels that we've been taught to identify with. And for example, when you say an angel, you don't necessarily think of a dragon. You think of it like this glowing, fluffy winged, being with a halo around his head, very much the opposite of what you would imagine a dragon. But what we've learned is that the dragons put a glamour on things. They put different label on things. They compartmentalize things. So we don't recognize them as all being part of the same thing. But here are the different labels. Of course, gods and deities, very much the same. Angels, the jinn, supposedly the Islamic classification for angel. Ifrit, also an Arabic classification for a demon, dragon, or angel or god. Leviathan, of course, coming up in the Old Testament, referencing a sea dragon or sea serpent. Mermaid, siren, or nymphs. They are all variations of the dragon, as is the Gorgon, which is what Medusa is, the lady with the snakes for hair. And of course, devil, Satan, Lucifer, all referenced in the book of Revelations as the dragon. Fairies, fae, and of course, they come from the word phanes, which is the primordial Greek god of creation. And we go on to werewolf, which is one of the most common beings which shapeshift that we're aware of through cultural, urban cultural mythology. The werewolf shapeshifts from a man into a dog or a wolf. And then the vampire, which of course has shapeshifting abilities too, but most commonly known for drinking blood, also known as a succubus. That's what, the Lilith, which is Adam's first wife, according to the alphabetic Ben Sira, was listed as a succubus or a vampire, also known as a strigoi in Eastern Europe. Now, there are endless lists of different types of dragons. I've just gone through a few there, and feel free to go onto Wikipedia and look these up. I have really just taken a screenshot and put a few here for people so that they get an understanding of the fact that there are endless lists of dragons, because why would there be endless lists, endless mythologies, endless folklore if there wasn't some truth to the existence of these beings? One of the things you learn about the scientific method is that if the facts come up in another place from a different source, completely unrelated to the first source, there must be some truth to the facts if they're corresponding. Now, what you have is you go through different parts of the world and start finding the same creatures turning up again and again and again, some of them with almost identical mythologies or set into an almost identical context. So there has to be some sort of reality to the existence of these beings. If the lists of them are just so insane, I mean, they wouldn't be something that someone just hypothetically imagined and put into a storybook. If it wasn't for the fact, if it was the case that these were such a thing, they wouldn't turn up in every single culture across the world. As I said, please do go onto Wikipedia and check out for yourself the various different types of dragons. And what you tend to notice is people tend to name the dragons by region. Okay, for example, here's some of the Asian dragons, the Chinese dragons known as the Lang dragon. The Indian or Indonesian dragons are referenced as the Naga. Japanese dragons, Kaima dragons, Korean dragons, Philippine dragons, Vietnamese dragons. You see, so all the different parts of Asia have their own different types of dragons. And then you go on to the European dragons, and then there's another endless list of different types of dragons which are referenced by region: Catalan, French, Scandinavian or Germanic, English, Welsh, Hungarian, and so forth and so forth. And you keep going through the list here: Armenian, Albanian, Romanian, Greek, Portuguese. We're going to be dealing with the Portuguese dragon tonight, but it really is a very long, extended list. And yeah, they just have lots of interesting names. They all have very detailed mythologies. It's not just, an anomaly. They all come with quite a bit of back history, and usually some saint or another in history trying to slay them. So it's interesting to see that. And this is why we study dragonology. People often say, so why study dragonology? It's because dragons are everywhere, in almost every cultural mythology across the world, as I've just demonstrated. Feel free, as I said, to go onto Wikipedia and pull up some of those lists for yourself to verify this. If not clearly depicted, they turn up in one symbolic form or another. Most people are completely unaware when they come across these symbols or creatures in history, myth, or fairy tale. They're most completely unaware as to what they are really looking at and what the greatest significance to these creatures and their symbolic representations are really all about. Well, tonight we're going to be dealing with a very specific kind of dragon called a wyvern. Now, a wyvern is a very interesting creature, and I'm just going to scroll back here and you can have a look at some of these lists we've got going here, because the wyvern is actually listed here under English dragons. It's typically thought of as an English dragon, all right? Wyverns are common in medieval heraldry. The usual blazon is a statand. Wyverns are normally shown as dragons with 2 legs and 2 wings. All right, we're going to go deal with the wyvern a little bit today, okay? The wyvern is, a legendary creature with the dragon's head, as you can see, wings, 2 wings, and 2 legs, as you can see over here, and a tail. Now this particular wyvern has a typical dragon's tail, but you do get the sea-dwelling variant of the wyvern as well. We'll show you an example of that later on. But the sea-dwelling variant of the wyvern normally has a fish's tail. And the wyvern, for me, is one of the best examples of a dragon that shows how dragons were actually mermaids as well, containing a fish tail, because the wyvern comes up both as a normal dragon and a sea-dwelling dragon, having the very distinctive fish tail. Here's a wyvern depiction from a 14th century Welsh manuscript, very old. And you'll notice this particular depiction of the wyvern shows the wyvern with one head on the side, which is where the head would be, but also the tail having a head on the other side. And we've covered this off in previous Dragonologies, the multi-headed aspect. Of course, you come across this in dragons with 7 heads, the Nagas, Book of Revelations, the dragons said to have 7 heads. The multi-headed aspect is a common theme of Dragonology. We see this coming up quite a lot. Now here's various depictions of wyverns, in different contexts, so we can see how they've been depicted. And this is a really beautiful one. Wyvern supporting the arms of John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough. Okay, look at this lovely wyverns over here. And here they've got what looks to be like eagle claws or bird's talons, with the typical dragon tail. Now in this depiction, which is a bit older, 14th century, carved wyveron is what this one was called, on the choir stalls of the Chester Cathedral in Cheshire, in England. And here you can notice that they have cloven hooves, right? Cloven hooves, of course, the scales like a dragon would have, but with a very human face. This particular wyvern has a human face on it, and of course the 2 wings. It's interesting when you start to look at the etymological roots of the word wyvern, because the usual spelling of wyvern is not attested before the 17th century as anything other than being a winged 2-footed dragon. It is an alteration of the 13th century Middle English word wyver, which is taken from the French wyver, guivre, and wouvre. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Apologies to my French counterparts if that was a butchery. But these words, these 3 words themselves come from the Latin word vipera, meaning viper. So this is the Latin word for viper, vipera. Okay? Now that's very interesting, because if you know what a viper is, you know it's very commonly known as a type of serpent or snake. So again, we get back to the serpentine etymology. And this is the beautiful thing about Dragonology, is you always come back to the same point no matter which route you take, because ultimately there is only one truth with regards to this stuff, which is why we always come back to the same point. Now, I love this particular depiction. This is a wyvern weather vane, and it's got a lovely layer of patina from the oxidization of the copper or bronze that made this. But you can see a lot of skills gone into making this particular little creature. The bipedal theme is very interesting, and we did say that the wyvern, of course, has 2 legs, very common theme. That's what distinguishes a wyvern from a dragon, is that it has got 2 legs. 2 legs, very commonly distinguishable by its 2 legs. Now, what else has 2 legs? Well, humans are bipedal, so are birds, which is interesting because it's showing that the dragon is in fact potentially a human, or has 2 legs normally and then shapeshifts into a dragon as opposed to a 4-legged mammal. And the 2-legged bipedal theme repeats itself in various deity or god or mythical creature depictions. Pay attention to it. The bipedal theme is as important as, for example, the wings as a theme, which we've spoken about in great detail. So the 2-legged theme. Of course, we're 2-legged as human beings, and supposedly it's a human form that can shapeshift into a dragon, a 2-legged dragon. But the harpy is one of the best representations, of course, being a bird. Now, we've spoken about this many times in Dragonologies. There's many variations of birds which are in fact symbolic representations of the dragon. For example, the peregrine, which turns up in the symbolism of the god Horus, sun god Horus. The ibis, which turns up in the representations of the god Thoth. We've got the dove, which is supposedly the Holy Spirit. Dove in Latin is columba, which is got the root word colu in it, which is a dragon root word. So the bird has always been a multi-layer allegory referencing the dragon, symbolically referencing the dragon. And very much so because of the bipedal theme, which is why we've got harpy in Greek mythology, human head, bird body, referencing the dragon. And of course, Typhon, thought to be the Greek Satan or Lucifer, the most feared and deadly of all the gods in Greek mythology. And you can see him here with, again, two legs, which look to be turning into serpents at the end. And the serpents crawling all over his body. Always we come back to the serpent theme. As we say, it always comes back to the same things. But clearly got two legs there, bipedal. And Gigantes from Greek mythology. Now, this is very interesting because Gigantes obviously comes with the, again, bipedal, but the legs turning into serpents, all right? The bipedal theme is very important. The two serpents' legs turns up in various representations in different cultures. So here we've got them actually turning up as the two legs being serpents for the god Gigantes. And this is the War of the Giants or the Gigantonarchy, which very much like the War of the Titans is just a story of how the gods all went to war with each other, and one group of gods got angry with the other group and cast them out, and long story there. But interesting to notice that in the depiction of the War of the Giants or the Gigantes, that they all had the bipedal legs depicted as serpents. Again, please feel free to go to theoi.com if you wish to go and pick off some of these pictures because they're all referenced there. Now, other words that are derived from the same word root group as wyvern include the following. The word wife, veer, werewolf, worm with a Y or an O, and of course the OR being a clear dragon root word. The word Guinevere, virgin, viper, Venus, and venom. And of course, this is a lovely picture of Queen Guinevere's mane by John Collier, of course, representing the ritual of the May Day festival on the 1st of May. But what's interesting to notice, and I'm going to go through why all these words, which actually can be derived from the same root word group as wyvern, they all too have much deeper symbolic aspects referencing the dragon within the greater study of dragonology. Now, the concept of marriage is interesting, and we've covered this all before. A wedding ceremony is actually based upon a funerary ritual, okay? The whole ceremony that we engage in today, we think, oh, it's a wedding. No, it's actually based on an old funerary ritual where you are marched down the aisle. What do? They carry the casket down the aisle when you die. It's all the same basic steps. The veil is a representation of death. In fact, if you look up the symbolic significance behind the veil, you know, when we talk about the gods having the vela focaccia, the billing garments behind them, there is a much deeper meaning to it, and it's normally a representation of ritual and death. So the bride wearing the veil is a representation of her death. And when she lifts the veil, it is the woman being reborn. And it's, again, a referencing of the death and rebirth cyclical thing, which, you know, comes up throughout dragonology when you look at ritual. All the fertility rituals are cyclical based on the birth and death of the sun, which is where you get the Jesus myths from, etc. And this is just more of the same pattern that we're looking at here. So the concept of marriage and a wedding ceremony is based upon a funerary ritual where the woman dies in her current form and is reborn. The veil represents the death shroud and the act of symbolically lifting the veil reveals the rebirth of the woman as part of the marital union. And marriage is in fact a merger of stock. For those who understand the concept of the straw man, you'll understand that your birth certificate is in fact a stock certificate. Human beings are stock. We are listed on the stock exchange. And a marriage is in fact a merger of stock, which is like two companies coming together and taking one name, which is why the woman takes on the husband's name. Not always, but usually it's a merger of stock. So it's two companies merging into one, so it needs one name, not two names. And this is why the word marriage is interesting, because the word marriage actually comes from maritime admiralty law, okay? Because it is through the process of maritime admiralty law that we have in fact been made stock on the stock exchange via the use of a straw man, which is our fictitious corporate identity. It's not who we really are. But this is what the whole concept of marriage is. Marriage is nothing more than a corporate merger of stocks put together with a very nice occult ritual called a wedding. And most people don't actually understand the symbolic significance of all of this. But becoming a wife means you have gone through the process of getting married. And just like you have a birth certificate, which is a stock certificate, when you get married, you get a marriage certificate, which is a certificate indicating that the two stocks have in fact merged under one identity. Okay? Now, the other word we wanted to look at that comes from the word wyvern is the word vere, V-E-R-E. And to understand the significance of the De Vere bloodline being the oldest dragon bloodline in existence, I do really recommend reading the book called The Dragon Seed by Prince Nicholas de Vere von Drakenberg, who was unfortunately murdered, I'm imagining, by agents of the Jesuits. But Prince Nicholas actually published some very interesting books before his untimely demise. And he points out very clearly the history of the De Vere bloodline that goes all the way back, okay, all the way back, as it says here. The Holy Grail descent of the House of Vere, vampire god kings of Eurasia, right, vampire god kings, all the things we talk about. And he traces their descent through time, that these dragon bloodlines are real. In fact, he was one of them. And he has many, many titles which are in fact recognized by the British government and the secret services. And he was in fact able to issue diplomatic warrants to people who were close to him or who were his emissaries, etc. So he had recognized status. But it was his openness about the dragons and his various claims of the fact that the Catholic Church have near enough taken most of the true original dragon bloodlines out of power and replaced them with a lesser group of black nobility. Anyway, that's not where we're going with this, but the De Vere bloodline obviously being one of the oldest dragon bloodlines out there, this book written by Prince Nicholas de Vere von Drakenberg, really worthwhile reading, a lot of interesting information in here, and of course a lot of the stuff we get from Dragonology we've also gotten from this bundle of information. Let's talk about the legend of Queen Guinevere. Queen Guinevere, of course, was famously married to King Arthur of Camelot, and Arthur's surname, of course, was Pendragon. And these royal dragon families were absolutely obsessed with maintaining the purity of the dragon bloodline. So they were heavily interbred, a lot of incest. But it's interesting to notice Queen Guinevere is of the De Vere bloodline. Okay. First off, the first part of her name, Gwyn, which can be spelled with a G-W-Y-N, is an old Celtic and Gaelic word for queen. Hence why Guinevere, queen of the De Vere bloodline, she was a queen from the De Vere bloodline. So Queen Guinevere, queen of Vere, makes perfect sense. So you've got the surname Vere in the name Guinevere because she comes from that bloodline. And of course, Arthur is in fact also from the royal reptilian dragon bloodline, hence why he's got Pendragon in his second name. Pen, of course, referencing the fact that he was the head dragon. And then, of course, there is the supposed mythological creature known as a werewolf. As we've already mentioned, werewolves are one of the best examples of a creature that shapeshifts. And shapeshifting, of course, is a very common trait and a reoccurring theme relating to dragons. We already spoke about this with regards to therianthropy or metamorphosing or metamorphosis. Another interesting word that comes from Wyvern, of course, being the word virgin. The word virgin contains two dragon root words. And when you have a word that has two very clear dragon root words, you pay attention, okay? You have to pay attention. The word virgin contains two dragon root words being ver, okay, which of course is etymologically cognizant with vir, which we've already spoken about. And then of course jin, one of my favorites, from the dragon root word group jin, which you get gen, gene, genetic, genesis, gon, the root of dragon. So, of course, and then the word jinn being the Arabic classification for a demon or an angel. Very interesting, that. And, of course, the worm, W-Y-R-M, all with the common dragon root of O-R. Okay, the worm is commonly known as a reference to the European dragons. And when I Googled worms, the little picture that came up, it's interesting again to notice the hybridized look of this creature, like it's a couple of different animals stuck together. It's not quite one creature, which is a common, again, very common recurring theme of Dragonology, is monster or hybridized look of these beings. The word viper is very interesting. Because again, like important dragon root words, the word viper contains two very interesting roots. Of course, the VI, which of course is very common. You've got the VI in virgin, which of course is rooted to ver is etymologically cognizant with vir, but the VI in virgin is etymologically cognizant with the VI in viper. Okay, so you've got the VI there, but you've also got the second part of the word viper, which is the PER, per. Now, this root is also very common in Dragonology, and if you start looking at the dragon root word per, it transliterates into a number of other roots as well, because of course the vowel sounds always change out. So you've got par, per, pior, which is a very clear serpent root word. To peer, look or spy, all those words are dragon root words, oculus, etc., all heavily linked with dragon etymology. The fruit, called a pear, which of course transliterates into fear, because PH is phonetically an F. And then para and pala, two very common dragon root words, paragraph, and where does it royalty live? In a palace. And then of course peri, the word peri is a Persian angel or dragon. And then of course Persia, per comes into Persia or Persian, purple, and the Dutch version of purple is pars, and then pearl, or French word parler, which means to speak. Very common dragon theme as well, speaking and looking. So we can see how the word per, where the root goes, and sort of how far stretched it is. And we've covered this all off in great deal of previous Dragonology, so this will not be new to you for those of you who have gone through the lectures. So viper, two common dragon root words there, of course, very significant word. Then the word venom, which of course we spoke about in previous Dragonologies as well. Poisonous venom is often found in snakes or serpents, which of course are representations of the dragon. And the venom also has very deep symbolic occult significance because they use the venom in rituals. So the venom is of course very important. And it has an allegory referencing rape as well. The venom is supposed to be symbolic of semen. Then the goddess Venus. Besides, as we say, being born from a shell, Venus is also a reference to the morning star, which in turn is also a reference to Lucifer, which means light bringer. That's what Lucifer means. And when we start looking into how significant light is, because light references the knowledge, the fruit in the Garden of Eden, the apple, is always thought of as the fruit of knowledge, forbidden fruit. And this is what Lucifer brought, was the light. Literacy has the word lit in it, which comes from the word light. And again, illumination, being illuminated or enlightened means you had some knowledge. All very significant when you start to look at the thematic allegories. And as promised, we just thought I'd show you some variations of hybridized type beings. Of course, this would be the typical wyvern, the two-legged creature we've been speaking about. But this is one with a fish tail as opposed to a dragon's tail. So this would typically be what a sea wyvern is depicted as. Here we've spoken about Pegasus as well. Again, the wings, always significant, a lot of symbolic allegory. We've got a hippocampus, which is the Pegasus with a fish's tail, much like you get the wyvern with the fish's tail, again indicating that dragons can be aquatic as well as airborne creatures. The griffin is something we'll be dealing with as well, which again, hybridized creature, half lion, half eagle, or so that's meant to be the case. But ultimately, all these creatures are symbolic references of the dragon. We've dealt with griffins plenty in previous Dragonologies, but I do want to deal with the griffin again, which is a legendary creature with the body, tail, and back legs of the lion and wings and head of an eagle with the eagle's talons as its front feet. Okay, the griffin is a symbolic representation of the dragon, and what's interesting to notice is one of the spellings of griffin actually has the dragon root word "offi" in it backwards. Interesting. Here's another other representations of the griffin, and you can see how different the stylizations are from one period or one culture to the next. Of course, this is the Persian version of the griffin, the Achaemenid griffin at Persepolis, which is the old Persian Empire. And then, of course, the statue of a griffin at St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, which is just, it's beautifully done, very much a lifelike expression in the eyes, you know, amazing carving on it. And then the hippocampus we spoke about earlier. The hippocampus, often called a seahorse in English mythology, is a mythological creature shared by Phoenicians and Greek mythology, though the name by which it is recognized is purely Greek. It was also adopted into Etruscan mythology, but the hippocampus is typically normally depicted with having the front part of it being a horse and the back part of it, including the back legs, not existing, but rather being a fish's tail. And we mentioned the vela focaccia earlier, the billowing garment normally depicted behind the gods. Of course, this is Poseidon, you know that because carrying a trident, riding the hippocampus, pulling the carriage, the vela focaccia behind it. And here's some depictions of the hippocampus. This is a fountain in Dublin, very, very pretty. And this is a 2,000-year-old Roman mosaic depicting a hippocampus as well, beautifully done. Now going on to another kind of dragon, this is the lindworm. In British heraldry, a lindworm is a technical term for a wingless bipedal dragon, although they are sometimes depicted with wings, but generally without. So you notice this has two legs but no wings. In Norwegian heraldry, a lindworm is the equivalent of a British wyvern. Now, in these beautiful Scandinavian countries where you've got Norse mythology, you'll find these amazingly carved rune stones from sort of the Viking and Norse era, just so romantic and dreamy. I love them. They really do cast you back to another time. But if you look at them, you'll notice how beautifully carved these. They planned how they were going to carve these because they interweave, they show three-dimensional reality, you know, going in and out and under and twisting in and out. But notice that these don't have any wings. Okay, that's why they're lindworms. These as well, these have the two legs, because you can see the lindworm come up there, lindworm coming down the side there. There's its legs, it's bipedal, but no wings. That's what defines the lindworm typically, is not having wings. Now, your mungander, which, pardon my spelling, again, the dragon root O-R there, very significant, as we'll see as we go through this. In Norse mythology, the Midgard serpent is the most prominent of the lindworms. Okay? And Odin tells the story of how the lindworms were gnawing on Yggdrasil from below. And he said, more than an unlearned fool would know. Interesting, because that's quite metaphorical too. In other words, the devil is always gnawing at us from the underworld. Odin names his lindworms using the word O-R-M-R, Ormr. Okay, again, the dragon root word O-R turning up again, which means snake or serpent. Ormr means snake or serpent. And of course, there's a famous story of Thor who slays Jormungandr, and this is done with his amazing hammer, which apparently he only has the power to yield because only he is worthy. And this is an Icelandic manuscript from the 18th century, beautiful artwork depicting Thor slaying the Midgard serpent. The other variation of a wyvern, interestingly enough, is a basilisk. And basilisk is a very interesting creature as well, also bipedal, right? 2 legs. In European bestiaries and legends, the basilisk is reputed to be the king of serpents, having a deadly glance and having a mitre or a crown-shaped crest on its head. And this is also typically what we hear of when we talk about the plumed or feathered serpent, is having this plumage on its head. The basilisk is alleged to be hatched by a cockerel's egg, which was incubated by a serpent, okay? So you notice the hybridization theme coming in there again. The basilisk is also referenced as a cockatrice. This is where it gets interesting because we're going to deal with the cocker etymology. But have a look at this depiction I found. Basilisk or Amphissian cockatrice, okay? That is what the basilisk is known as. And if you want to go and look for a basilisk, go to the emblem of the city of Basel in Switzerland. The basilisk is the emblem of the city of Basel. Yeah, other depictions of the basilisks, which are commonly depicted with the weasel. You'll notice the weasel here. But you'll notice very cockerel type features. Looks a bit like a rooster. The front part of being a rooster. This could easily be a rooster were it not for this long dragon's or serpent's tail which comes out the back. And here's another wyvern variants. Of course, we've already spoken about the basilisk and the common theme of having 2 heads, one, of course, coming off the tail, the multi-faced or multi-headed aspect. And this is a picture of a cockatrice over door at Belvedere Castle in New York Central Park from 1869. Quite a fierce-looking dude with very clear dragon wings, cockerel head, and, of course, a dragon's tail with bipedal, 2 legs. Like a human being would be. The cockatrice is a variation of the wyvern, basilisk or dragon with 2 legs, serpent-like tail and a rooster's head. This is a modernization of what a cockatrice look like. But the word cockatrice is etymologically indicative of yet another set of dragons from another culture. The cocker or the coco. The coco is the male version of this dragon. The cocker is the female version, although I don't think I'd be able to distinguish which is which if I was faced with them, but they distinctly have a male and a female aspect, just like the naga. In Southeast Asia, you have the naga, which is the male, the nagi, which is, I beg your pardon, the nagini, which is the female. These entities have distinctly masculine and feminine counterparts to each other. The coco is a type of dragon, phantom, or ghost. And the words phantom or ghost, of course, again, we've dealt with previously, having clear, distinct dragon root words in. And this particular dragon entity originates from Portugal and Galatia. Now, typically the word coco references the skull. Krauko, which means head in Galatian, is interesting because from Krauko you get crown, okay, which of course what sits on top of your head. This over here is, you can see people underneath it, but this is the kind of typical festival you have in Europe, various ritual festivals, ritual harvest festivals, etc. This is the Cucufera during the Fiesta Mayor de Santa Tecla in Tarragona in Spain. And It's a type, as you can see, very much referencing a type of dragon here. Okay, I know it's a bit strange looking, but this is distinctly, they are trying to create a dragon-like effigy, which they bring into this particular festival in the street. So the coco is an interesting one. It turns up in some interesting places because the Portuguese sailors of Vasco da Gama called the fruit of the Polynesian palm tree a coco because it resembled a head. All right, as we say, coco means head in Galatian. Coco also means skull. Croco is etymologically consonant with crown. That's where we get the word crown. You know, the top of the head is known as the crown of the head. So this is where the word coconut came from, because these Polynesian palm trees had these, big fruits on, which were virtually the size of your head, some of them, but also they have a little bit of a face on. Look at the eyes on them and the mouth, okay? So it could very much look like the head of something, which is why the coconut derived its name as it is. Now, the significance of the head and the skull is huge, because you find sort of the head symbolism or the skull symbolism turning up in various representations all over the show. And the Portuguese create these skull-like lanterns, which are common with celebrations such as late harvest ritual festivals such as Halloween or All Saints' Eve, also known as the Day of the Dead. And these lanterns are supposed to be carved to look a bit like skulls, okay? Commonly done into pumpkins, but it can be done into other vegetables as well. But this head theme is very, very common. In fact, decapitation ritual is very common in these dragon worshipping cultures. And in fact, stories such that myths that spring around up behind these legends that surround this whole head theme or headless theme. One particular one, of course, being one of my favorites, the Headless Horseman. And that symbolically references the many occult rituals which include decapitation. And the ancient Mayan cultures which worship the feathered serpent or the dragon, they used to play ball sports, resulting with the captain of the team being decapitated, the captain of the losing team being decapitated, which is where you get the word captain from. But decapitation is common, and of course the obsession with the head or the skull in Dragonology, very common symbolic ritual significance. Because of course when we're dealing with things like the Day of the Dead or Halloween, these are the icons that turn up. This is a symbolism that turns up, is the skull, the ornate, decorated, ornamented skull. These sugar skulls, these beautiful sugar skulls which they decorate for these various festivals, honoring Santa Muerta, Saint Death. And sugar skulls are not just sugary treats, they've actually turned into like the very popular fashion print. You find sugar skulls almost everywhere nowadays, be it put on in terms of makeup for Halloween, be it printed onto clothing or fashion apparel, or be it actual the treats that are spawned the whole sugar skull craze, being these little guys over here. And the Aztecs are the greatest example of this skull or head obsession. When the Spanish went and discovered all these various ruins and traditions by these various cultures in Mesoamerican culture, they were absolutely horrified at how these various cultures such as the Aztecs and the Mayans just decapitated people and then stuck their skulls onto racks. They had these massive collections of skull racks, which they just stick a bar through the skull, and hang them up as decorations. And this was supposed to be an honorary thing to the gods, to have all the skulls displayed, how many people have been sacrificed in honor of the gods. And if it wasn't real skulls, then they actually carved the skulls into their masonry, repeating over and over again, just to show you how symbolically significant ornamenting their temples with the skull or the head or the coco, as they call it in Portuguese. In fact, coco makes perfect sense because in Dutch or Afrikaans, we refer to the head as the kop, which is a K-O-P. Now, the skull is also etymologically cognizant with the word school, okay? You can see that skull and school, very similar words to each other, okay? So the word skull, etymologically cognizant with the word school, and of course scholar, which in turn is derived from the word scolex. The word scolex is another word for worm. The word worm is an English classification for dragon. So you can see how it all ties into each other through the etymology. And scholar and color are two words that are etymologically cognizant with each other, which is interesting because the word color has the colo root in it. C-O-L-O, which is a very common dragon root word. And what's also interesting to notice, when you think of color, perhaps you might think of paint or even paper. Both the words paint and paper are rooted in dragon etymology. Now, interesting, because we've taken the colo and we went and looked at what other kind of dragon-like creatures there were, and we found one with this name called the colo. Okay, the colo is described as an evil rat or cockerel-like creature from the Mapuche mythology, but its appearance very much does vary depending on the region where the myth is told. Sometimes it's described as a feathered rat, sometimes a snake or a lizard. The colo is said to feed off people in much the same way as a vampire would or Dracula would. And I specifically use Dracula here because we reference Dracula in the next slide. Because the root colo, okay, comes from the very common dragon root word group, which I shall go through. Dragon etymology root group of this word, these various groups of words are colo, which again, we transliterate the vowel sounds. The O becomes the U, to kolu, again, to kola, to kulu, to kula, to kala, to kali. And here's some of the interesting places that this root turns up, okay? Colon, as in your bowels, for example. Column, and we've spoken about how columns are very important in ancient architecture, particularly in these temples dedicated to the gods. It anchors the Ophidian vibration. We're talking about the Jed column in ancient Egyptian mythology. Again, very significant. Dracula, it's got the Kula root over here. Columbus, Columba, Columbia. Okay, Christopher Columbus, the goddess Columbia, and of course, Columba is the French word for dove, and the dove, again, symbolic of a dragon. And then you've got the word ejaculate, which has the cooler root, and immaculate, which has the cooler root. Again, people think that someone is of immaculate conception, they're born of a virgin. No, what it means is that is a symbolic allegory referencing the dragon. All right, I think that's enough from me on Dragonology for today, and I do want to thank you all for being with us. Please do check out the archives available at ccn.media, where you can catch up on this and all other previous episodes of Dragonologies, plus all the other amazing broadcasts that go out via Conscious Consumer Network. Do check out seasons 1 and 2 if you have not yet done so. It will most certainly help you understand the current context of information that we are putting out, and all of those are available on dragonology.info. You can help yourself to a quick reference by just going straight to the Dragonology website. And on dragonology.info, you'll also find the ability to purchase Book 1 Spellbreaker. Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker is on discount. We give you a €5 discount if you use the discount code Dragonology S3 for Dragonology Season 3. And then you can get your book for €20. It is an ebook download, so please guys go to the website and download your copy of Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker for €20 using the €5 discount code Dragonology S3. Also, do check out the broadcast guide to see what else is on the network. There's plenty of other amazing information, and we do change weekly as to when various shows are showing. So to keep up to date, we update it weekly, and we suggest you check out the broadcast guide to see what is on. Also, please support the network funding campaign for 2017. CCN is a publicly funded network supported by a number of amazing initiatives. But we do rely on public funding to keep the network going. So please help us keep CCN on the air for 2017. And everything you need to know about Conscious Consumer Network, of course, is listed on the CCN website, where to find the live broadcast, where to find the broadcast guide, and of course, if you want to donate to the network, as well as all the recent articles that have been published down the site. You can find the Dragonology fundraiser over here, or the donate to our fundraiser for 2017 as well on the website. So everything is available at consciousconsumernetwork.tv. And of course, if you want to get in touch with us, you're welcome to email us at info@consciousconsumernetwork.tv. As always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. My name is Mel Ve. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and we'll see you again. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.